I've included another example in one of the things on your table about going into a classroom as a teacher and as a researcher, recognising that I'm not shedding my teacher self. Yes, I'm there as a researcher. And I've offered that example. There's another example where I might end up, depending on my response to a child who's asking for my help, I might end up actually being not a proper teacher and not a proper researcher in both of those situations. So again, I can't entirely determine who I'm seen as, what position I can occupy in that situation. One more general example before I start talking specifically about some students that I've been working with. This example comes from a document produced here at Sheffield Hallam to give some guidance on how we could raise standards in school experience when our students are on placement, how they could be getting higher grades on their placement. And I'm just really intrigued by this example, that in English, note actually only takes 3 lines, well, 2 lines, to say what they want to say. We'll get better placement results if they make better links between what they do in school and what we're talking about working on in university. And this is stuff like use more drama and get children's own experience and ideas in that. In maths, it's a structured, the planning's the difficulty. Planning's difficult. We need more structure, and we actually need quite a specific and detailed example to help them see. And it's very technical, it's very specific, it's about that highly recognisable thing, if in doubt, break maths down into smaller steps. But I'm really intrigued that when it's mathematics that we're thinking about, in terms of how to improve teachers and support our students, we get this very technical, very specific thing where children have difficulties, our students have difficulties with planning, and here the solution is a very specific technical thing. If you're dealing with English, it's a completely different situation. I want to move now specifically to talk about some of the initial teacher education students I've been working with. I think they're very interestingly positioned because they are learning about teaching. The group I've particularly been working with have chosen to take mathematics, especially within a primary education course. And they do learn some maths at their own level within that. And they have offered me an extremely interesting opportunity to look further at the number of times I think I have noticed that confidence comes hand in hand with competence when you're talking about maths and learning maths. And extending that further, that exactly the students I'm talking with, their confidence is often described as the problem with mathematics primary maths teaching. They're not confident enough. I was re-looking at a bit of Hamilton maths video from ages ago, and there's a little snippet at the end where Anita Straker is saying one of the very positive outcomes of the project is the teachers are much more confident and the children are much more confident. And it's a term that just seems to appear unproblematically. If you like, this is very much referring to one of the tricks of power that's described on the yellow sheet, to masquerade as something very common sense. It's a faintly noticed power that this term appears recurs. This is very much part of a discursive orientation. Look for the recurrences. Keeps coming up again, and it slides from this much more affective term, attitude-based term of confidence into a much more action-doing-based competence. And I think it's a really intriguing site to look at in that respect. Another example of this tension of what is this thing called confidence? It's hard to describe. Is it an attitude? Is it an action? Comes up in a lot of documentation as well. Report from SATS tests. What was done well from SATS tests is people are more confident at solving problems and organizing numbers. How do you know from a written script that they're more confident? What does that mean? And yet it slides in that it's only because I'm really alerting myself to where confidence appears in documentation, etc., that I'm picking up on that. It's a very difficult to notice connection. That's just another example. What I did with these students was ask them to complete some unfinished statements, and then they interviewed each other, and I interviewed them in groups, etc. And on the orange sheet you have a lot of the things that they said about their peers in a group. The group sessions were part of a Learning to Learn maths session, and were specifically aligned at trying to help them develop secure knowledge in maths. If you've seen that expression coming around, deal with this problem of primary teachers' maths. And they said a lot of things about their peers, about themselves, and about children they thought were confident. And it's really interesting. This is a very, very similar quote from Leonie Burton's work looking at A-level students and confidence. But this is exactly what I was finding. Teachers, my students, didn't have any difficulty in identifying who's confident by what they do. It's a very performance-based thing. It's very much what you're actually doing. And yet, confidence is this more fuzzy, attitude-based, almost inner state, referring to some sort of inner state. So I think this is a really interesting site for something like a discursive approach, because there are this faintly noticed truth-making, if you like. Negative 1 minute. I just would like to say one thing, please, Miss. I came across in documentation a research monograph that several people here have actually contributed to, that's online, on maths teachers and maths teacher education. I think a really good question, which is, how can students develop a capability for working on their own professional development in a way that relates to their personal aspirations of what it is to be a teacher? I think this is a really good question, and I think it's really interesting from my point of view to think about how my attempts, the courses I've produced and that I've worked on with colleagues here, to allow students to connect their own aspirations of how they want to work with their own learning, I think have often felt partial failures in lots of cases. A lot of students appear as if they're really struggling with dealing with open, investigative, connected maths for themselves, and yet are clear that this is something they aspire to in their work with teachers. And again, I think that's a really interesting tension, and that's an interesting question for me to continue thinking through what a discursive approach might contribute to that. I'll stop.